Welcome back, my friends. In today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you guys the 4 lessons that I learned while I was healing my trauma. I hope you can keep an open mind to the possibility that certain events that are burned into your mind that keep coming back and keep resurfacing could be trauma that hasn't been acknowledged. So the first lesson that I had to learn was that the other person's intention for their hurtful behavior towards you does not matter when you're healing. When you're healing, it is only about yourself. It's about how you feel. And for once, it's a chance for you to be selfish. I mean it seriously, because when you make excuses for other people's actions or to try to justify why they did what they did, it actually inhibits you from healing. So the biggest example that I like to use when I think about this, and it can be related to like friends, but family is the place where you can find the most excuses for why someone did something to you. My parents have done many things that have hurt me in my life, and I spent 20 years of my life justifying why they do what they do without realizing how harmful it is to myself. So I was beat as a kid, and that is normalized in the Asian parenting style. It's normalized amongst many of my friends. And personally, I would never beat my future kids. I don't believe in it. It's not the proper discipline. It makes no sense to me. Anyways, I was beat as a kid, and there are repercussions to being beat as a child, and that is considered trauma. It is part of the reason why I'm not great with physical touch. I don't like it as much as most people do. I don't initiate it as much. My biggest justification for them when I thought about me getting beat was the fact that other kids got beat and my parents got beat a lot as a kid. Some other things that I would tell myself is like, oh, they're just trying to discipline me, and that's the only way that they knew how to. They're showing love just by beating me because they care. But that's the kind of stuff you kind of have to tell yourself when you're in survival mode and you're stuck with a family that you can't leave. But now that I'm older and I'm out of that situation, I know I don't have to ever get beat by my parents ever again. I learned to turn the situation inwards and make it about myself. We'll take this example, right? Getting beat as a kid. Let's set aside the fact that they were beat as a kid and that's how they knew how to discipline you. And just for a second, set aside the fact that they do love you and they're doing it out of love and your parents just don't know how to love you. Set aside all those excuses, and for once, I had to think about how I felt in those situations. I thought about how much it made me cry. I thought about how much hurt it has caused me. I thought about how lonely it has made me. I thought about how much it hurt to just get physically beat with stuff. I thought about how hurtful and confused I was as a kid to be getting beat and not understand why you were getting hit. I thought about how I felt like the beatings were justified because in my head, I was like, I didn't do anything wrong. Why am I getting my ass beat? I've spent my entire life making excuses for actions from other people instead of just being able to recognize that what their actions did hurt me and cut me deeply. And it's actually very humbling when you sit down and have to say that these people hurt you, because I know that when you've experienced so much hurt in your life, it's very easy to put up a wall and just do things by yourself, do things so that you're not as close to other people. But I realized that it's very, very humbling to have to sit down and admit to yourself that you've been hurt so many times and that these things that people have done to you have hurt you. I was very stubborn and I didn't want to admit that certain people hurt me because that meant that they had power in my life at one point or another. And I realized that in order for me to move forward from all these events, I had to sit down and be like, okay, that really hurt, but I was a child and I didn't know better, or that wasn't fair to me. And that kind of helps me heal my trauma more than me deciding that I was going to make excuses for these people and continue to lie to myself about why they do what they do. I started to realize that people have choices. Like me getting beat as a kid, my parents had a choice to not do that in the moment. They had a choice to control their anger. They had a choice to redirect it, but they chose to take it out on me. For me, that changed a lot of things because I told myself I would never do that to my kids. So how is it possible for another parent, or any parent for that matter, to beat their kid to oblivion, to the point where they're bruised, whatever it might be? It doesn't make sense to me, and it should not be justified. I think in the beginning, when I first started healing, I did not want to villainize the people that I loved. I did not want them to look bad in my eyes or in other people's eyes. And so your brain is going to make up a ton of excuses for why this person is not a bad person. But sometimes it's about separating those two. I had to get over the feeling of feeling bad. I was able to overcome that by telling myself, this isn't about them. It's not about what kind of person they are. It's about time that I started showing compassion towards myself and my own feelings. And that really flipped the script, because then it was like, it wasn't even about that other person, right? It was just about their actions, how I felt, and how I want to be able to overcome it. That made me feel so much better about it, because I'm being kind to myself. And I know I deserve that. I started to see myself differently when I was able to be kinder to my own feelings, when I was able to separate and stop making excuses for other people. When you make excuses for other people in your life, whether you care about them or you don't, it's very, very easy to lose yourself, because every time you make an excuse for someone else, you're invalidating your own feelings. And that leads me to my second point, because your feelings are very important. It's hard to face sometimes, and the feeling of shame is going to come up when you start healing. I had to learn to face these tough feelings that controlled how I felt, and it controlled how I acted for the past 20 years of my life. And I had to learn to face shame and embarrassment. When it came to facing shame and hard feelings, I like to do it in therapy. I used to do it by myself when I journal, but therapy is where I feel the safest, and it feels like there's a controlled environment. My therapist is very trained. I trust her. It took me over a year to trust her, but I feel safe feeling my shame, talking about the most embarrassing things about myself, or the most darkest things that I've ever thought, and it has changed my life. And I think it's so important. Like, anyone who has experienced trauma has experienced shame, deep rooted anger, or just like really strong, hard feelings that are hard to face that we learn to suppress. Shame makes me hate being in my own body. It makes me want to run away, and that's like my biggest reaction. So when I'm in therapy, I know, like, okay, this is 45 minutes of me having the safest possible environment for me to express myself. Even as I'm talking about shame, I can feel it in my body, and it feels like my throat's going to close up and my heart starts pounding a lot faster. And I just feel like, okay, I need to escape this situation. But right now I have my feelings very much under control. And so I understand, like, okay, this is just something that I'm experiencing, and I can learn to like overcome that and make sure that I don't just freeze in the moment. So going back to the example of me getting beat as a child, there was a lot of self-blame, and, shame comes along with it, because I felt a huge sense of self-betrayal. Logically, I understood that there was nothing I could do as like a 4 or 5-year-old to prevent myself from getting beat up. Self-blame kind of looks like asking myself, like, how could I have let these things happen to me? Telling myself that it was my fault and I could have done something differently to prevent that from happening. So it's so hard to face that initially. I couldn't even believe that I was saying what I was saying when I was saying it in therapy, because I was just like, there's no way I felt this. Like, this is what I've been feeling my entire life, this self-blame. And that's why I've become such a perfectionist, because I wanted to make sure that I never got beat again. It sounds crazy, but it controls your life. Like, this type of thinking that goes unacknowledged controls your life, mixed in with, a million other types of feelings of self-blame that you've attached experiences to. And I don't encourage anyone to face these feelings head on all at the same time. I think that can be more harmful than it can do good. I do it like every once in a while. Sometimes you just have to feel like you're ready before you face that feeling. But it is a very good skill to have, because it's hard to process trauma without facing those hard feelings. Facing them helps me move on. It helps me allow those situations to stop controlling my life and the decisions that I make. And while we're on the topic of shame and hard feelings, I also want to explore the topic of generational trauma. Personally, I think a lot of my anxiety around getting things done, or anxiety around how other people think of me, was actually not from my own experiences. Like, I genuinely didn't really believe that people were naturally bad, but I did have this anxiety around like these people are going to think the worst of me. And I've started to recognize that this was actually a type of thinking that was passed down from my parents. Being able to dig deep and like understand like why I think a certain way, or like why I felt shame towards a certain situation, really helps me see the generational trauma and like those types of mindsets that were passed down to me. My parents are immigrants, and I felt like a lot of their mindsets that were passed down has given me a sense of like low self-worth, or just a feeling of shame about like who I am. Over the years, I've really learned to embrace that and understand that this is not my thinking. This is something that I've been taught. It's conditioning, it's experiences from other people, whether it be my parents, my grandparents, and I've just been able to kind of like absorb that as a child, but it's not related to what I've experienced myself. The third thing that I learned to do while healing my trauma is learning how to reparent myself and understand my needs. This means learning how to soothe my inner child, learning how to be more compassionate to myself, learning how to give myself respect. I talk about this a lot in all my videos, but it is so important, because as someone who has experienced trauma has really lost a sense of what they need as a child, what they've needed after the experience. Learning to understand yourself and what you need through a traumatic event is extremely helpful in helping you move forward. It might feel like it's too late because this traumatic event happened 20 years ago, but actually giving myself that same type of validation, whether it happened like 5 years ago or 20 years ago, has really helped with the shame and just healing, because I might not have given myself what I wanted back then. I might not have gotten what I wanted back then, but now I can, and I'm old enough to do that. Just even acknowledging the fact that that's what you needed is very healing. It really helps me bring closure to certain situations that have always been coming up. One type of punishment that was in my household was basically like you go and sit in the dark basement with no light on when you've done something wrong. I think it happened to me the most because I'm the middle child and like I'm the most rebellious, and I felt like I had to speak up for myself the most as a child. It was very lonely down there. I mean, it's terrifying. Surprisingly, I'm not scared of the dark, which is weird. I guess like I found comfort in that. But just sitting in the dark and just imagining like a 4-year-old, like you make a mistake, right? Who knows what it might be? You broke a dish, or maybe that day you're feeling rebellious and you're like, I don't want to do the dishes, or like, I don't want to do my chores. And then next thing you know, you're thrown in the basement, the door's slammed shut on you, there's no light down there, it's like dark, it's big, it's damp, there's noises, there's, I don't know, mice, whatever. And I had no technology, like no phone, none of that at the time. And so I always just sat at the bottom of the stairs and waited for however long for my parents to come get me. And then they gave me this whole spiel on like, did you recognize what you did wrong, blah, blah, blah. And obviously I would be like, yes, I did, but I'm probably lying. And so when I thought about those moments, it was very hurtful. It was terrifying. And even acknowledging those hard emotions of like how scary it was for me as a kid, like how was 4-year-old me supposed to understand why I got thrown in the basement? And I was able to recognize that in that moment, I needed a parent figure. I needed a parent figure to tell me what I did wrong instead of throw me in the basement. I know I needed someone to tell me that I'm going to be okay and that I'm safe. It was very healing to help myself acknowledge what this little girl needed when she was thrown in the basement. I think a lot of parents don't know how to handle when their kids make a mistake. Something that I wish I got when I made a mistake was a hug and gentle guidance instead of getting yelled at. You know, it feels really cheesy when I first did it, but I felt the emotions come up and I knew that it was very healing for me, because then I felt less alone. I felt more connected with myself. I felt less like I wanted to run away and more comfortable in my own body. In a way, I was forgiving myself for not being there. You know, when you're that young, you don't know how to be there for yourself. So there's, you know, you have to be self-compassionate in that sense for kind of like abandoning yourself. But now that I'm old enough and now that I know that I can do this and, you know, I'm more independent as a person, it's so healing to go back as like who I am now to my memories as like a 7-year-old and helping that little girl version of me feel safe. The last thing that I had to learn while healing my trauma was to learn to ask for help. I'm so bad at this. Like, I am still bad at asking for help. It happens a lot more often than it used to. It usually comes up when I'm like feeling extremely resentful and angry towards other people and people in my life. And that's when I realize I'm like, oh shoot, I should have asked for help in this situation. Learning to ask for help has helped me heal in my journey and not feel so alone all the time. Once you figure out your needs, sometimes you need to ask for help, and sometimes the needs are not something that you can give to yourself. And part of the healing journey is to learn how to trust other people again. It's to learn how to lean on other people. It's to learn that your needs doesn't involve just you and yourself your whole life. You're gonna feel like you want connection. You're gonna feel like you want intimacy. And those are all wounds that you've collected over the years or like through your trauma. And learning to ask for help helps heal so many of those wounds, whether it be intimacy, whether it be abandonment, whether it be just you never having your needs met and you needed help in a certain situation. For me, it was all of the above. And when I first asked for help, or when help was first offered to me, I felt so uncomfortable. And I think sometimes I still reject help when it's offered to me because I'm like, that's too much. And part of it was because I learned as a child that me asking for help was too much when it came to asking my parents. But now I'm realizing that, it's not a big deal to everyone when you ask them for help. Some people actually want to help you. Unfortunately for me, my parents weren't one of those people, but I was asking the wrong people my entire life. And so now I learned to ask the right people. I learned to even accept help sometimes from strangers. And it has been very healing because it makes me feel like I'm taken care of. It also makes me feel like, there's not just terrible people out there and not everyone's selfish and doing their own thing. Like, there are other people who actually care about you. There are other people who care about other people. So it really helps me attract the right people into my life. When you're not used to getting help as a child, it's so hard to ask for help. One thing that I practiced was if I was at like a store or a supermarket, I would ask like somewhere for help with something that was like at the top shelf because I'm short. Like, seems like such a small thing, but it really feels so nice when someone's like, oh yeah, like I'm willing to help you grab that thing that's up there, instead of me trying to figure out how I'm gonna get it down myself and like look like a fool. It just made me see society differently. I saw the beauty in people, the kindness in people. I honestly believe that people are born good. I just believe that most of people in society are kind, and if they're not, they probably went through something, and I try to be understanding to that too. I wrote the whole script and then I was like, okay, I need to throw this one in because I think a lot of us need to learn how to ask for help. Please leave a comment below on one thing that you would like to work on out of everything that I shared in this video. Please subscribe because that'll really help, and leave a like because that'll help too. And I will see you guys in the next video. Bye!